Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Gameweek 38 team selection. We're finally closing out the FPL season. I'm not going to go with that sort of long-winded intro the same way with the cheat sheet in terms of whining about the season, but it is what it is. The rank is, I think, right now 188k. It's obviously not very good, and there's only one game week left in the season to make 1-2 decisions. I would say that are quite crucial. Hopefully, decisions that'll keep me in the top 200k. At this point, I don't know anymore. But yeah, that's the kind of summary. Game week 37 was a pretty eventful week, but just a bit of a slog in the end with the small red. Missing out on players like Consa because I went for the 3 of 33 strategy does feel a little hurtful because I think the strategy had some merits. But clearly, by actually investing into Aston Villa on 33, into players like Martinez, for example, it became a lot more difficult to actually justify owning Aston Villa players outside of that run of fixtures. And the same goes with some of the City players, like, for example, Ruben Diaz, who's done consistently very well, or even KDB in spurts. As it stands, we got 48 points. O'Brien finally sort of returned the goods with a clean sheet, so that was nice. Bit of a skill issue in terms of playing Eze over Clivert, I guess, in terms of the minutes, but actually the outcome was very positive, so nice to know that some things can go positively for once. Wisa has a move that was sort of out of Marmouche maybe 2 weeks back. Feels okay because Marmouche did score in the end and he did get a lot of bonus points, but ultimately I think I'm generally more happy with the Wisa pick, and I think Marmouche's availability, I suppose, or even minutes for future games might also be a little bit different, right? And hard to sort of predict. Palmer captaincy clearly didn't work out. The other options would have been Watkins or Mbomo, who did ultimately score 3 points more. Not that it mattered too much. I guess Chelsea were close to getting a pen call. That was clearly just a dive from Tyreek George, and Mbomo had chances at getting a major haul. So I feel quite lucky, I suppose, in the end that didn't fall the other way around. Watkins didn't have the quite same amount of chances, but still got his assist. Madueke, ruined a couple of Palmer assists, so I won't complain too much. But looking forwards, I think the team actually looks very strong for this week. We have a couple players, and I think that the major uncertainty is over Trippier, who right now still is injured, who hasn't been in training yet, as confirmed by Eddie Howe in his latest and final press conference pre-match for the end of the season. It seems like he has a chance to train over the next few days, and maybe he'll be ready for Sunday. But we'll have to just sort of wait and see with that situation. Elsewhere, I'd probably say the rest of the squad doesn't have the best of minutes in terms of someone like Clivert, but the fixture is so good. I'm almost in the opposite position of a lot of managers who own the likes of Rodgers, who own the likes of Sarr, who will have quite an easy decision to make to probably keep those players or to move into maybe, let's say, an Arsenal midfielder instead. I'm in the tricky position where I own Clivert. I think that the right decision is probably still to play him over someone like Eze, despite Eze being far superior as of late, far more in form, and Clivert's minutes sort of being in the toilet. I just think that Leicester at home is that good, where hopefully I'll chance that he gets to play more than 45 minutes of football, and hopefully he does. So that's kind of the general sentiment of this week. Otherwise, I think I'm very happy with the teams that have been fielding out as of late. It's just that, as it turns out, it's just not getting it done, right? Players like Bowen have definitely performed really well. Other players that I think I probably would have missed within my team, clearly the Aston Villa defenders that I mentioned to at the onset of the video, but I think a lot of that was just due to the strategy choice. And then, of course, the ramifications of choosing that sort of making that decision and what that means for my team going forwards week to week. So that week was where Aston Villa got, no cleans. And since then, they've gotten a lot of cleans. Consta's gotten a lot of points as well. So that happens in FPL. So we just have to move on. For Game Week 38, just to close out the season, decision making is quite simple, I believe. We actually only have a few select fixtures that I think are standout games. As some people might have pointed out previously in Game Week 38, I think the general goal scoring expectations are quite high on a fixture like this. So the leading teams in this aspect would be Liverpool, Bournemouth, Newcastle, and Arsenal. Conversely, of course, clean sheet odds are very high for the teams at home facing off versus a very poor team, at least on offense. So Leicester, Everton, and Southampton clearly, even Ipswich to an extent, but West Ham's defense just aren't sort of at that level where we can say that. Plus, they're also playing away. So from a fixture targeting point of view, I think investing more into Newcastle versus Everton makes sense, particularly from a defensive point of view. Conversely, Bournemouth versus Leicester makes a lot of sense too. The likes of Kirkes, even from a defensive point of view, or if you just move into more assets like a Semenyo, like an Evan Nilsson, even a Tavernier over Clivert, I think makes a little bit more sense right now. Arsenal, the flip side of that equation, Saliba is out. QBR should play. But then I think players like Martinelli are very interesting in terms of the minutes that you're expecting to get, even though this is a bit of a dead rubber match as well. Otherwise, I think a lot of the games are a little bit more mixed. The Aston Villa game probably is actually a little bit more one-sided that I think that the market odds do share. I just think that Aston Villa has just been such a solid team as of late, even though they're playing away from home. Chances that they'll do well are quite high. I would say the same with Man City. So a lot of people being already invested into these teams, I don't think is a major problem. It's just a case of if I look at, let's say, clean sheet odds, there's a decision to be made because I have Trippier in my team. So as it stands, I feel like the most simple decision for my team is probably to do Palmer to Saka. But I think the biggest conundrum is going to be over Trippier. And part of Game Week 38 and the eccentricity of it is that all the fixtures happen right before the deadline, and they're at the same time. And so the fixtures happen, you know, right after the deadline. And the tricky thing is whether we get leaks for certain players. And I think Newcastle, unfortunately, is a club that have managed to keep themselves very tight-lipped around news. The Trippier news so far doesn't sound good. It might even be the case that he cameos as opposed to starts, which would be hugely negative for myself. So there's a bit of conundrum there where I think maybe moving Trippier to a Shar or a Kirkes makes a lot of sense in my position. I think based on the news right now, I still might actually just make a move like that because my third defender this week just isn't good enough for me. I think Nico Williams isn't good enough. O'Brien isn't good enough, certainly. So I would like to probably invest into another Newcastle player, and I'd probably move in this case, as I said, into someone like a Fabian Schär for Trippier, and that would mean that I'd be fielding Pope, Guardiola, Ait-Nouri. Ait-Nouri clearly isn't a very good pick for this week, but he's at least at home, and he's a very offensive left back, so or left wing back at times. So, we'll take this going forwards and unfortunately make a bit of a defensive move for this week where ultimately I still think that within the pool of attackers that I have, I don't think I necessarily need to make a move. Clearly, some people can think that the Palmer move needs to be made, but I think it's a bit of a 50-50. If I have a little bit more confidence towards the end of the deadline, or we get a leak, for example, that Trippier's fine, then clearly the move that I'll be making is going to be Palmer to Saka. I don't think I'll necessarily be captaining Saka. I think the captaincy will still probably sit with someone else because you never know how many minutes he's expected to play or he's going to play within this specific matchup here. But it's just such a good game for Saka, and it's hard to sort of say that I really want to be missing out on a game like this when the flip side is just Palmer versus Nottingham Forest away, and Nottingham Forest are still a very strong defensive team despite the slip up, in recent memory. So that's going to be the team. I will be fielding Clivert over Eze as well. So Eze will be first bench, Nico Williams after that, then O'Brien. If there's even a situation where, let's say, I think, for whatever reason, I think Saka's minutes could be poor. Let's say we get a league that Saka is not going to start. Then maybe I'll just, keep, and I somehow, for whatever reason, think that Trippier is going to, start. I might go triple Newcastle defense, maybe bin off Ait-Nouri, hope for the absolute best outcomes in terms of, different things going forwards. Right now, I kind of have Ait-Nouri hedging against Mbemo. I would be generally considering something like maybe going Ait-Nouri to Shar, and that could be, one way to close out the rest of the season. Triple Newcastle defense, so hopefully a good outcome there could, boost me quite a fair bit in terms of rank. Otherwise, the team is as it stands, right? So I will be captaining most likely Salah. I think it's just nice that he's got a home match. I think Liverpool will probably try to put their best foot forwards in the last home game of the season before they sort of fully celebrate with their fans. Evan Nilsson is quite interesting as a captaincy option as well. That's why I kind of have him as my vice captaincy here. But the team plays itself. It's going to be Evan Nilsson, Watkins, and Wisa up top. Salah captaincy, as I mentioned. And that's it for the team. What's interesting about Game Week 38, I think, is that we should and will have leaks. But one of the tricky things, I suppose, at this time of year is you still don't know how long exactly players are going to play. So I think investing into fixtures where teams clearly have something to play for, or at least the minutes of certain players can be fully guaranteed, is probably very, very important at this moment in time. So I think that that's something that we can probably take advantage of. As I mentioned, though, Trippier's minutes just aren't good enough, and he's basically the main conundrum for my team. I'm hoping that a Newcastle league could sort of at least allow me to make the best decision or the most appropriate decision for my team. That's pretty much all for this week. I think there's some other interesting picks as well across the board. Like even for people who own Bowen, he's been extremely hot in terms of form. I can see a lot of people captaining or even vice captaining Bowen on a week like this. Maybe investing into Aston Villa feels a little bit rogue outside of let's say Rodgers, because you'd expect a little bit more depth in this final day, given the sort of suspensions and injuries recently that have sort of precluded other players from playing. But that's pretty much it. I think another interesting shout is also the idea of going for a Danny Welbeck as well for people who are looking for a forward option on this final day, because we know that João Pedro is now confirmed out. You're basically looking at someone who is guaranteed to be on penalties for Brighton, most likely to play the full 90 minutes for this fixture, and he might actually be the second best forward potentially for this specific week, because we can't also expect for Tottenham to put their best foot forward even if they are actually at home. So I think that's quite an interesting option to consider for a lot of people shopping for, let's say, a forward option, and maybe if they already have Evan Nilsson. In the midfield, I think you've got an opportunity, as I said, to go just for a Bournemouth midfielder or Martinelli. These are the options that I quite like the most. And then in defense, as I mentioned, Kirkez, Shar, maybe even Livermento, right? If you kind of are thinking that they're going to play a three back again, Livermento gets to play that left wing back position. Those are kind of, I think, bits that I'd like to highlight for this week in terms of transfer directions. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Enjoy this last FPL game week. I think I will probably be heading towards some events on the final day, including FPL meets. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make a stream, but I will try my absolute best to be there. Otherwise, as I said, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you guys maybe for Club World Cup, maybe for next season, but looking forward to everything as we go along.